Okay, this is Jimmy Jive. You're listening to Motor City Rock Talk. Today, my guest is a drummer from the area, Detroit metropolitan area, Michigan area, who's played on the scene for quite a number of years. Started out, I think, playing with the Howling Diablos, quite a long stint with Mitch Ryder, also with Uncle Kracker. My guest today, like I say, is a drummer that's performed with all three of those groups, and I'm sure more, Mr. Jerome Day. Hey, buddy, how you doing?
Hello, Jimmy. I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. Great. Well, anyway, let's start out with a little background on yourself. In other words, tell me where you were originally from and as far as what inspired you as far as getting into music, specifically playing drums.
Okay. Well, I was actually born down in Ohio. So the first 5 years of my life were down there. My grandpa was a farmer and the family were farmers. Probably right before the drums, and I'm sure it had to do with rhythm, but when I saw the Jackson 5 on TV when I was little in the early 70s, I was hooked. I was glued to the TV, and supposedly I told my mom I wanted to be the Jackson 5 when I grow up. So that was the first energetic moment of a connection to music. And then to follow right out of that, we moved up to Michigan when I was 5 years old, and I grew up in Dearborn Heights, technically. When I was around fourth grade, it was like time to pick an instrument. And for some reason, without a question, I gravitated to the drums. And it just kind of felt natural to me. That was like the next moment that I felt like, okay, feels right. And it feels like I can do it, feels natural. So I stuck with it. From then on, it was that. And then when after I started playing, there were people in my early life that I saw like playing in jazz band. A particular guy named Jeff Woods. I have no clue where he would be now, but I just remember when I was like real young and in the band days of junior high and seeing that red Barkle Ludwig drum kit, Jeff Woods playing on the auditorium stage. That was a moment for me. And I can tie that right into the moment of seeing my first concert when I was 13 and I had already been playing for a few years at that time, but I saw the Rockets at Pine Knob, who was front and center, Johnny B. Badanjic on his Ludwig drum kit with his bandana on his head. And that was another moment where I was like, wow. So those were two pillar guys in my early years, just juiced me all up to get going. And then that would be more on the local side of things. Right. And then the actual inspiration on the other side of things from just magazines would be Modern Drummer. I'm flipping through Modern Drummer, like 9 through early teens. And I'm got the subscription and I'm seeing all these guys in LA, Jeff Porcaro or even, Buddy Rich was a huge one.
Oh yeah, of course.
And just started getting into everything, just exploded at that point in those early years. That was the early time of just inspiration. When I saw those guys in Modern Drummer, I just thought to myself, I want to be a studio drummer like them and I want to live in California. And then that was kind of like a huge moment that actually ties into my story later.
Did you take any drum lessons when you were young?
Yeah, so it was band, and band.
Right.
Like, it was all the different bands in school, like concert and symphony band, and then also jazz band in junior high. And then when I got to high school, there were so many drummers fighting for the jazz band seats that it kind of turned me off. Maybe I'm not the most competitive guy. I found my niche with the musicals. So I was like the pit drum kit guy for all the musicals, pretty much all through high school. So I felt really comfortable and enjoyed that. And during that time, to answer your question, in my mid-teens, I started taking private drum lessons. And there was a place in Dearborn Heights, no longer there, but when I was growing up, it was another huge moment thing for me was the drum shop on Ford Road.
Oh, yeah.
Back then, it was either Bill Cairo's in Redford or George and Ann Hamilton that owned the drum shop in Dearborn Heights. And my parents would take me over there, when I was young. And I would just losing my mind. I wanted everything. And it just felt like home. And they were like so kind to me. So I ended up buying my first couple of, my parents bought me a drum set there first in 7th grade. That was a used kit. A few years later, I bought my first like brand new, kind of mid-level drum kit. Then you just go through like the talent show at high school. And it just kind of went on from there. And yes, private lessons at the drum shop.
Let's move up a little further from that. What would have been the first band that you'd have played in that you would have played out in the circuit or the club scene at that time?
Well, I have kind of two answers. I'm going to go with this answer right now, but I do have something to tell you. Like when I was 16, I went to a rock club and they allowed me to come in and sit in with a band, and I played two songs. I played Have a Drink on Me by AC/DC, and I played Ain't Talking About Love by Van Halen.
So
So
you were
that was
underage at that
I
time?
was, I was underage. They allowed me to come in. I might have been 18. I was definitely 16 to 18.
Right.
And a guy that was older knew the band, and it was at the Studio Lounge in Westland.
Yes.
Here I am, like I show up with my stick bag and my sweat towel, and I'm like, oh my God, this is like, whatever. And I go in and I get up on the stage, and this is actually the very first time I've ever been under stage lights on a stage, and here I am, like I said, 16 to 18, somewhere around there. And I played the two songs. Of course, I was like, it was electric and I was
Yeah.
excited. And I'll never forget, go figure, we walk out of there and I got to do that, and I left my stick bag there. And never got it back. I don't know what happened, but there was that technical thing, but that was a non-paying situation.
Sure.
To answer your question, the Mike Gutierrez said, "Hey, do you want to fill in for me?" And now I'm probably, like I said, 19 or 20,
Mm-hmm.
taking lessons with him. And he goes, "I'm playing this gig at the Van Dyke Manor up in Sterling Heights or somewhere up there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a R&B pop gig. My drums are there. Do you want to do this gig for me?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah." I'm like, "Oh my God. Oh, this is it. This is it." Who knows? It probably paid like $50 or something.
It's a
But
start, though. It's a start.
but yeah, anyway, I go, "Yeah, I'll do it." Gives me the info. I go to the gig, and there's his drums. I sit down, I meet the guys, and it's like an R&B outfit. We just go and we do it. And, I'm sure maybe he gave me a set list. I don't remember, but we played the gig. And I just remember the first couple songs in, I'm like, wow, I can't stop. Like at home, I could
Mm-hmm.
stop and go get a sandwich or something. And
Right.
here it's like, I just remember that thought of like, wow, I have to actually finish this song. I'm tied to this chair, for this
Yeah.
whole set. So yeah, that was my first actual gig. It was a success. Everybody was happy. And then I continued to play for that artist for a handful of years. His name was Stanley Mitchell. I believe he's no longer with us, but Stanley Mitchell was my very first actual band playing gig in the early 90s when I was young. And we went around like playing, it was like playing like everything from like Cameo to, R&B to 70s, 80s, like, Earth, Wind and Fire,
Yeah. Yeah.
all that different type of stuff. And yes, he was the first thing. And I met him through my drum teacher. From that, yeah, I went on and started cutting my teeth with the scene.
Let's
Yes,
there again move up a little bit farther. Other
sure.
that R&B band. When then would you? What other band would you have played in? Was it the Howling Diablos next, or was there
Yeah,
somebody else that you
yeah.
played with?
So yeah, out of that, basically there was a time for maybe 3-4 years in the early 90s. I met the Howling Diablos in 96. So basically up until that, like 92 to 96 and beyond, but basically I was playing with blues groups. Like, so actually one of Mitch Ryder's old guitar players, Ray Goodman, he was playing around, he like lives up in the Waterford area. So anyway, so through people, I was just out networking. I was
Mm-hmm.
probably putting my ad in the Metro Times at
Yeah.
that time, and also had like little business cards with the, my name and number. Probably after the Stanley Mitchell thing, it was like just playing with these different guys, like, and it was like based out of Royal Oak, Waterford, and it was like this whole blues scene. Chris
Mm-hmm.
Brantley was a guy that I met early on who actually played with us also in Mitch Ryder. And Chris Brantley definitely is a well-known guy from the Detroit area who's now living up in Minneapolis, but still a dear friend. But he's a guy that I met early on, and he knew like a lot of blues cats, and it turned into like, I had met Val Ventro, who's also a phenomenal guitarist in my early years. And I played with Val Ventro quite a bit at the Backseat Saloon. That was an early gig after Stanley Mitchell. Val was one of my early guys. I would show up with my brand new Tama kit, a whole big toolbox in case anything broke. And I quickly learned you just need a roll of duct tape and a towel.
But these groups you're talking about, like this blues stuff, so you're talking about working bands. You're not talking about stuff that, going out playing a necessarily original material. These were, set blues stuff. or
Yeah,
were they
yeah.
writing stuff?
Correct. And I always feel that this was a very important part of the next step for me
Right.
because from like say the basement to Stanley Mitchell to now these guys up until the Diablos, this was a very important time because I was jumping around and we were playing these blues gigs, playing the blues standard, everything from the Allman Brothers to
Mm-hmm.
whatever, but I was learning all the different shuffles. I was learning all the different
Styles.
styles.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was just learning how to gig. Like, I mean, to really become a real musician like that, I really feel like this is where I really learned how to just be a player and out in the scene and I'm meeting people. And so that's what happened in the early 90s. And then to come up to the first band would be where it was original music. It would be the Howling Diablos. And I went to the Bears Den. My good friend Andre Frappier said, dude, we got to go up to the Bears Den. He and I were talking about maybe starting a little project and hanging out. And he's like, we got to go to the Bears Den. Sunday nights at the Bears Den. You got to go. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
kind of like, oh, maybe, we'll see. And once he finally got me there on a Sunday night, and I was like, oh my God, as soon as I saw them, the whole thing, I was like, I literally, Jimmy, in my mind, I said, this is my band. This is the band I have to be in. That intense. And I sat in with them that night, met them again, like usual. I gave my business card, not thinking for them, but just to network. I'm a musician now. This is my goal. I want to be,
Did they not have a set drummer at that time, or were they just kind of like floating
they
people in and out?
No, they did. They had Jeff Shaky Folk, who lives down in Nashville now. He had something pending. He had Robert Bradley's Blackwater
Oh,
Surprise,
okay, yeah, yeah.
and they just got signed. So here he is. He's actually on his way out. I didn't know that. Here I am just handing out my card just to say, hey, guys, let me know if you know of anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah.
they called me. They're like, you want to hang out and check this out? I was like, I had said that. I mean, that's the intensity of the universe, I believe, the law of attraction.
Yeah.
You want something bad enough and you can feel it, it will come to you. So anyway, that's what happened. So I got the gig and I thought I had right off the bat, I'm like, it was just full steam ahead. I mean, that summer of 96, they gave me a book of gigs and it was just like Dave Leone, he was our manager and, he booked everywhere. So we were playing everywhere. And again, that was the next level where my hands were bleeding and I was taping up my hands and wearing gloves because we were doing so much. And that band was heavy on drum solos as well as groove. So here now I'm doing like this awesome, funky, fun music and doing drums, getting to highlight my drums and solos and whatever. It was a whole new experience, whole next level. And they were going somewhere and it was magical. And those are my brothers for life. And we had just the time of our lives. I was with them for 7.5 years.
Who were the other members of that band? I mean, obviously Tino.
Yeah. Tino and Johnny Evans on sax and vocals. And those guys were the kind of the two leaders of the band.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mike Hollis on bass. He goes by Mo. And then Jeff Grand on guitar. And then also AJ, again, another brother that we lost years ago, AJ Abdullah. He was the percussionist at the time and he played a big part in getting me into the band as well. He was like, I really like Jerome and all this stuff. And then, he was kind of rooting for me to get in the band. So I got to give props to AJ. Yeah. So it was AJ, Jeff Folks at the time that I replaced and Shaky. And then Tino, Johnny, Jeff Grand and Mo.
Were you still playing with them when Mike Smith came in and was playing some guitar?
That was right after I moved to LA. They kind of reformed with a new drummer and guitarist. So Jeff Grand was with me.
So you were more part of the heyday kind of thing. Did you record with them then?
Yes, I did. I'm on a few tracks on Green Bottle. Mm-hmm. I was just getting in, but they had already tracked a lot with Shaky, so he's on the majority of it. But yeah, I'm on a few tracks, Sixth Street Opera, and one of the Green Bottle mixes on that album, and Criminal Mind.
Howling Diablos, like you said, man, they were all over the place. You guys were playing everywhere. Yeah. It seemed like everywhere. That was also kind of around the time when bands were playing 4 or 5 nights a week. Were you guys doing that, or were you doing just like 2 nights a week, Friday, Saturday, somewhere?
In the beginning, like especially with Dave Leone booking us, we were playing like 5 nights a week at least.
Wow.
I mean, we were doing every outdoor, downtown Brighton festival, the, Mount Clemens festival, like all of that stuff. So we were playing all of that plus bars, plus Sunday nights at the Bears Den.
Yeah, because the Bears Den gig, I know they did that for, it seemed like years.
Yes.
wasn't that kind of an open mic kind of thing, like come out and jam with this, so to speak?
Yes, it was considered that. It was basically the Howling Diablos. They were the house band,
Right.
and it was their gig.
Hmm.
And then they just kind of opened themselves up to that. So, like, you could come sit in. That's actually how I did it. I went, saw the band, was hooked.
Where do you go next from the Howling Diablos? What was your next
Yeah, so
phase?
yep, so that was an amazing ride, and I just want to make one more point that the
Hmm.
Diablos did everything under the sun but get that final record
Yeah.
deal. So here we are, like, on top of the world, and got
Hmm.
record labels, showcases, and all this stuff, and it was incredible, and it was just us against the world, and it will always hold the biggest place in my heart, to be honest. Everything I've done, that was literally the most special time of my musical drumming career with everything we had done. With that being said, we just weren't nailing that down, and there were some inner issues with the band, with a couple guys. So, there it was kind of like we had a little bit of stress underneath the surface.
Hmm.
So, go figure that. As you recall, at the beginning of the interview, I was looking at Modern Drummer when I was a young lad and seeing those California drummers like Jeff Porcaro, and my dream never left. Like, I always wanted to move to California.
You wanted to be a
Yeah, I
session
mean,
player?
not knowing that was starting to go down, that was soon going to start dissipating with technology. And at that time, I just, no matter what, it's like I wanted to move to California. So at this moment, I had friends that had just moved there, and they're telling me, come on out, you can stay with us, get your feet on the ground and whatever. I said, okay, I'm going to do it. So I gave the Diablos like 8 months notice. I said, guys, I love you so much, but I'm going to move to LA, and I just want to see what happens. Played our last show in Traverse City, like, 2 weeks before I packed up the truck and moved out there. And then we even have done gigs after that. Like, over the
Right.
years, like, I've still played with them, and we still stay in touch.
You had to spread your wings. You had to test other waters.
Yeah, it was an amazing time. And yeah, and I had to spread my wings. With their blessing, I did. I did a whole trek by myself, drove across the country to LA, visited friends on the way, and just kind of had an amazing once in a lifetime experience
Mm.
doing that. And then I finally, got there, and my friends were open arms and, we're excited for you. And to have that extra support and not be living in your car was amazing. Their apartment was right at the Viper Room. And so first couple weeks, I just kind of had fun and got crazy. And then I got serious. I started in the first call at Detroit. He is the co-writer with Uncle Kracker and producer of his first few records. He knows me, since I had built my name with the Howling Diablos. I'm thinking, okay, I had a little list of people, and I started making calls. I left him a voicemail, and then we hooked up, and we met over at the Mint in Hollywood. And he's like, maybe Beth Hart will need a drummer. Let's just see what happens. That drummer might be leaving, or something. He was just kind of throwing out. A couple months go by. I'm in LA for 2 months. I'm already depleting my small savings, and I'm thinking, I'm like, oh, I don't know about this. It's like a cloudy Sunday, and I went rollerblading on Santa Monica. I just went rollerblading. I'm like, I'm in LA, might as well do something LA. I get back to my truck and unlock the truck. I check my phone, and I just flip it open, and it says urgent message. And I'm like, oh my God, am I in trouble? Like, what does urgent mean?
Hmm.
I click press send, and I press it, and it says, hey, Jerome, it's Mike Bradford. Just want to know if you're interested. I got some gigs with Uncle Kracker. We got TV shows coming up and a tour with the Counting Crows. And I'm like, what? Hung
Okay.
up the phone. I called him right back, and I said, hey, it's Jerome, and the rest is history. So I got the gig. And then the first thing I ever did was the Craig Kilborn Late Show. Literally, that was the very first thing we ever did, was do TV shows. And then we flew over to Asbury Park, New Jersey, and we did a fall to winter, like, college tour with the Counting Crows, playing like theaters. So long story short, what's really insane about my story is I moved to LA, and 2 months later I got a gig, which is totally unheard of. I would say luck and who you know.
Oh,
It's kind
that
of,
too, of course. Yeah.
I think everything, well, it's all of that. It's like kind of everything working together as one, so that was just crazy. And I think, wow, I should write a book someday. So I went out there, did that, then had like 5 wonderful years. A drummer had health problems. He's still in the organization, but he couldn't play drums for them anymore. He had to, in their management or something. So they had to bring in, and Matt Flynn is their drummer. Now, again, like they made him more of a band member. So he may be, for an example, I'm talking a little bit out of my thing, but he's in the photos and all that stuff. But where it would be Uncle Kracker, he's the solo artist and we're his backing band.
Right. He's the name.
We're paid, contractors and, hired guns, like you say. That's how it was. But like I said, it was an amazing ride. I met a billion people, just about everybody you got to experience all these wonderful things over like 5 years, 4.5 years.
Did you actually record with him then in the studio?
Oh, yeah.
Was that all done out in LA? Was that all done out there?
Funny enough, I got to live my studio drummer dream.
There you go.
I actually recorded at Mike Bradford's studio in Burbank. They called me for the next record when we were off tour and I was still living in LA there. I had an apartment now in the Valley. I had moved out from my friends. I was in the Valley there and they knew I was there, I guess. One day they go, "Hey, we're working on the next record. You want to lay down some drums?" And I'm like, "Yeah."
Now, how does that work exactly? He obviously writes the songs. You come in and he just kind of like plays a little guitar and says, "Find a groove to this," or did he have something specific in mind when you guys were recording this? He just give you freedom reign.
Actually, no. This particular situation, everything was completely pre-written and I was specifically asked to do specific playing. They did want, my talent on the recording, of course. They knew I could handle it or whatever, but they called me in and they said, "We got this song. It's a rock track. Here it is." And they'd play it for me. And, I'm looking for just, play like this. And he would tell me like kind of the beat or whatever. And that's what I did. And if I wasn't playing it quite what Bradford was looking for, he would just talk back and he would say, "Try this." So that album is called 72 and Sunny. It came out in 2004. It was third release on Lava Atlantic. It didn't fare so well, unfortunately. I love that record, not because I'm on it. I really love the songs on that record. I was kind of really sad, even if I wasn't on it. I was lucky to be on 5 tracks. My name's on 5 tracks on that. And a few magical moments in the studio, like this one tune he wanted me to do. It's called Blues Man. And he said, "Try this one." I think Bradford even played drums on it. And they're like, "Play this and just kind of give some fills." And that would probably be the song I was the loosest, where they let me go at it. I nailed it in probably 1 or 2 takes. And that would be the high magical moment. And the other ones where I did what was asked, they were happy with what I did. Yeah.
When you were recording, when you say you do it in 2 takes, did you record these in sections, or did you just like play it all the way through the song and then he listen back and go, "Okay, we like that"? And of course, with the technology they had, if you happen to hit something wrong or hit a rim or whatever, they can take that out electronically. Did any of that happen, or were you able to play all the way through it and just said, "Oh, that's a take, let's leave that"?
It's early 04 and Pro Tools is the new standard.
Right.
So we were recording into Pro Tools and basically it was that. It was basically I would do a whole take and then he would cut back and say, "Just in this one little spot, can you give me some accents? Give me some crashes right here on the upbeats." Like Blues Man was a particular one I recall where he, basically liked what I did and he kept pretty much the first take from what I recall. And then we went back and I just added a few extra upbeat crashes on a few sections. And then that was pretty much it. So that was pretty much mostly the first take plus a few additions. Another quick one on that recording, there's a song called "What Do We Want," which is another one of my favorites on that record, or out of the ones I've done. And he says, "Play like a funky groove." And I said, "Okay, I'll tell you what I'm doing in a minute." I go, "Okay." So I started playing like this funky groove and he took it and he looped it. He looped like a 2-bar phrase and threw like a flanger on it, like an effect. And then he took that, when you hear that track, if you listen to it, you'll hear that loop with like a funky effect going on through the whole song in the background. Then I played the song. Then I played like the regular drum track over top of it. And so that's actually two different things going on. It's my loop funky groove with a flanger or what phaser type thing.
There again, man, your background in playing that with that R&B funk kind of group, it fit right in it. All the experiences, life experiences, paying your dues. You were able to go in there and do that. You weren't going to look at them and go, "I don't know how to play a funky groove. I've been playing rock." You had the talent to do all that. That makes you kind of like sought after, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, that's what kept me going. I could be a chameleon. The Howling Diablos was basically everything mixed. It was a mixed bag of just everything, but it was like pop, rock, funk, the heavy groove for sure. And luckily I had a natural feel, so that helped a lot to just lay it down for that band. And then with Kracker, it was more like a pop sense. But like you said, when the groove was recorded, required. I mean, it was always a groove required with Kracker. Is he was based in kind of the R&B vibe, but it was like more poppy. And then, yeah, out of that, it was like Mitch, which was straight, full steam ahead, high octane, like type gig, or like a
Right.
full on rock gig.
Are you currently playing in any aspect out with any of these groups? You know, Mitch Ryder, or I don't imagine Howling Diablos, unless it's like you said, like a reunion gig or all that. How often do you actually play out with somebody of the stature and at the level? Are those one-off gigs now, or do you go on tour with him? How does that work?
Basically, I just did what you mentioned over 20 plus years, and I have a 12-year-old daughter that I'm raising right now. She's the most important thing, my focus now at this moment, but I still play out, like that level of gigs. It would be Mitch Ryder, and then other than that, it'd be local stuff.
Uncle Kracker is playing here. You'd be involved in that, or could be involved in that, in other words?
Actually, not really, because we've parted ways years ago.
Oh.
And even though we definitely are friends, I'll talk to some of the guys here and there, when we run into each other once every blue moon. There's always love and respect there for the Kracker camp. But yeah, they're east side and I'm west side. And basically, we don't really communicate much anymore. Kind of do their own thing. And I've been immersed over the last almost 20 years with the Mitch Ryder gig, kind of where my head's been between that and local groups. So it basically went Howling Diablos to Uncle Kracker to Mitch Ryder.
Now, how did you get involved with playing with Mitch Ryder? How'd that come about? Was that word of mouth because of your other connections?
So from the end of the Uncle Kracker gig kind of goes like this. Had done all these amazing things when I was in the band from 02 to 07. At the time, I thought, Kracker was on a hiatus. So it was, and again, we're just kind of like, we're sitting and, no money is being made, and it's not, anybody's fault. That's just the way the business is. But I kind of was like, okay, well, don't know how long we're going to sit here, but I need to make a living.
Right.
So I unfortunately had to part ways. And I thought at the time, which I didn't end up moving to Nashville, but in like mid 07, I went down there and visited friends, and I made a bunch of connections, and I knew the guys from Ches, and I thought, well, I think I might move down to Nashville. Like LA was different. LA, the passion and the drive was there. And for the Nashville thing, I wasn't 100%. I didn't sell it to myself.
Nashville now, the new LA? It seems like everybody's going there.
It is. It's like oversaturated, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like over the top, but you're correct about that. And so this is like before everybody moved down there. Like,
yeah.
So I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be the hot new thing. I better move to Nashville.
Yeah, you get a lot of session work there, I would imagine. At least studio work.
I'm not sure why I never really pulled the trigger, but from Nashville, I called up Kracker and I said, I love you, but I'm going to move on. You have my blessing. And then that was it. Moved on from there. And then it was about a year of just kind of just playing around town and kind of nothing going on type of thing. I had like kind of a down year after this whole big whirlwind of stuff from, like basically from the Diablo years all the way up to 07. It was just kind of like just nonstop of craziness. And then I had this down year in 07, and I was like depressed, and I'm thinking, oh man, what am I going to do? And then I get a call in spring of 08 through Brian Lord, and dear friend of mine, and he said, hey man, I got this Mitch Ryder gig. Are you interested? And he was calling Sean Bondriff, my other dear buddy who's a bass player. These were my core guys that I've been playing in bands with for years and years up to this point. And I said, yeah. I said, my first reaction was, I'll think about it. I hung up and I'm like, what am I thinking about? And I called him right back. I go, dude, I'm in. I'm so glad I did, because it was like that took me through this whole next era, from 08 till now, like, which has been however many years, 17 years, 18 years. That doesn't mean we've played every single gig that he's ever, those 18 years, because he'll go out, he'll jump on a bill with a bunch of artists and they have a backing band, that type of thing. But we've been his core. I don't feel like this band gets any recognition. And again, I'm not tooting my own horn. These guys are great players, and I felt like we were a good band that kind of was overshadowed by, hey, you're not the Detroit Wheels.
Right.
The hell with you.
Yeah.
And you got to live. You're not Johnny B. And it's like, That's right. I am not Johnny B, and he's one of my heroes because you might remember I said the first guy I ever saw on a stage was Johnny B, and guess
Right.
what? Who I wanted to be growing up?
Good.
Amongst all the other drummers we talked about, like Bonham
Sure.
and everybody. So he's one of my heroes for life, and he's the kindest, wonderful guy that has been my mentor, one of my huge mentors in the Detroit music scene. So anyway, to be able to back Mitch, knowing that Johnny B is the legend that did that, it's just there's not a day that I will not honor the legend of Johnny B and the Detroit Wheels as a
Sure.
whole. So we approach this as it's just an honor to back Mitch. So just to clarify that to all the haters out there.
I don't think there'd be
or
haters out there. They'd
yeah,
just be curious as to wondering. There was some kind of rift that happened years ago as to why he didn't reconnect with not only Johnny B but McCarty. But the past is the past, and everybody has their personal
I will,
reasons.
and Jimmy, I will say that I do recall during my Howling Diablo years that B was on the drums for a gig here and there. And that would be sometime in the late 90s, early 2000s, something like that. B playing with him again. But after that, I don't know. Speaking of, here's a funny thing, and this should be very well noted. Johnny B and I switched drum seat, if you think about it, because when I was in Mitch, Johnny B became the drummer of the Howling Diablo.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
All the people maybe that just kind of went under the radar, and it's not really a big deal or anything, but I always just thought it was funny that like now B's the drummer of the Diablos, and I'm back in Mitch all these
Right.
years, and it's kind of a cool, kind of just a fun cool thing to think about. So yeah, doing that, and so the majority of the Mitch Ryder gig over these decade plus has been just amazing, just playing out all over North America, from the US to Canada to blues festivals to anything and everything, and a few cruises. I've done one of the cruises. The guys have gone on a couple more cruises.
Again, this with Mitch, have they been like mini tours, or are you talking about like, oh wait, we're shooting here, then we're coming back, we're shooting here? Were they one-offs, or were you actually doing mini tours with him? Was he doing that kind of stuff?
In the very first like 5 years with him, like '08 to 12, 13, there was probably maybe a few, like 2 or 3 in a row type of things. But other than that, it's been strictly one-offs the whole time. But there could be in the early days up to 15 to 25 shows roughly, like per year, and then over the years, age and everything else, it's not as many. But like a couple years ago, we just played in Idaho. Like that would be a perfect example. Like, or was it? I'm sorry, last year. We had a one-off. It was in Idaho. We played this car show gig in Idaho. Everybody was excited. Mitch was coming, and the whole thing still going on. Like we're playing Waukesha, Wisconsin on Friday, August 6th or 8th.
And what would you say out of the other years you played with Mitch, like you say, in the United States and up to Canada, would have been probably one of the biggest gigs? In other words, one of the biggest stages. I mean, you played in some of these clubs. Did you headline or ever get to headline someplace really big, or what you would have considered big for somebody of his stature?
Yeah, a few come to mind over the years. One of them is Lincoln Center in New York City. On that bill, it's like, big outdoor show. They do the Lincoln Center concert series every year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This would be 2010, and it was Ronnie Spector on the bill, Question Mark and the Mysterians, and us. That would be just one example. Like Denver Taste Fest was a big outdoor festival. We played probably the biggest one ever with the biggest crowd. We played twice. Believe it or not, even though Mitch is a rocker from Detroit, we would get on this like country festival in Peterborough, Toronto, Canada. And it's a huge festival every year, and like all the big names, usually the big country artists. Maybe it's not just country, but I just recall like Travis Tritt and people like that there. I just remember it was like a sea of people. It was 2 stages next to each other. So a band would play, then they'd do the set change on the other one. And it would go back and forth like that all day long. It was like a weekend festival. And we've actually played that one twice over the years.
None of these shows probably would have been as on the big stage as like you would have done with Uncle Krack. That was a higher level than the stuff.
Correct. These were big shows. So the biggest show with Uncle Kracker would be a stadium. But obviously it would be earlier on in the day. So it's not going to be 80,000 people at that time. So we'd play, we were on the bill for the time I was in the band. I played 3 or 4 different stadiums. It was Heinz Field in in Pittsburgh. It was the Patriots, Gillette Stadium. Foxborough was the first one, Foxborough, Massachusetts. Those were the biggest stages that I've ever played. The biggest venue that I've ever played were those. At the time, we didn't have the smartphones yet, so I had my
Right.
video camera. I filmed like sound check. There actually is some footage on my YouTube channel. If you dig down, there's some clips from that Foxborough Stadium show.
Wow.
Or from the sound check, actually. I had somebody grab my camera and film sound check and just kind of document the moment, and I'm glad we did. So, yeah, those were some big shows. And then basically it was 2 years with Kenny Chesney warming up for him.
Yeah.
You know, I got to play all the arenas, all the Pine Knobs and all that stuff. And funny, tying a little bow on the whole thing, funny thing is I was even lucky enough and blessed enough to actually even do that with the Howling Diablos. We got to do, right when I joined the band, we got to do 3 or 4 shows out with Alice Cooper and the Scorpions. So it's funny. So like before all of this, Mitch and Uncle Kracker, rewinding for a second, to give the Howling Diablos the due that they deserve, and my dear brothers for life, we did everything in our power that you could ever imagine. Every showcase, Austin City Limits to New York City to Salt Lake City Olympics. We played with George Clinton. We toured with George Clinton. We got to do all this stuff, right? And all the sporting events, opening Comerica. When I first joined the band, I thought, oh God, I made it. But you know, in your brain, you think, I made it. And it's like everybody's dream, like thing that they think. We were touring in a van and following the buses down to Cleveland, and we played Cleveland, Cincinnati, Columbus, and Detroit was our last one.
Well, Jerome, I'm going to let you go. Hey, it's been really great talking to you. I enjoyed hearing about your career, and God, you've had one. You've definitely had one. You know, you've been there, done that.
It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, I really appreciate, like I said, you taking the time out and giving me a history lesson on, you know, Diablos and Uncle Kracker and Mitch Ryder. Really appreciate that.
Same here, Jimmy. I appreciate it. You know, I'll let you know when I get some new things online or in town. There'll be something happening in the future.
Cool. All right, Jerome, like I said, I'll let you go, and you have a really good rest of your day, bud.
You too. Right. Thanks a lot, and I'll talk to you later.
All right, buddy. Take care. Well, that was Jerome Day, local drummer that's been in the scene and nationally since like the 90s. So that's quite a career, having played with, starting out with some R&B group, going into the Howling Diablos, who, of course, at that time were huge in this town. They, you know, they were playing everywhere. You always heard about the Howling Diablos, and rightfully so, because they played some great stuff, did some great music. And then, of course, moving into how he connected with Uncle Kracker, moving out to LA and getting that gig and being able to connect with him and do those shows and just living that lifestyle, you know, not so much the ego as far as the rock star thing, but just, wow, I've made it kind of thing. You know, I'm playing on a huge stage type of level. And then coming back to Detroit and hooking up with the icon Mitch Ryder. Mitch is thought of and well respected to this day, nationally and locally. So kudos to him for that. Hopefully he keeps playing and maybe he can get something else going in the future. Hey, is that old stereo system giving you the blues? Maybe the receiver is a blown channel or the turntable just doesn't spin right anymore. Well, you should visit my friends at 7 Grand Audio Service. They've been in business for over 40 years. Located at 25642 7 Mile Road in North Redford. The owner Dash and his assistant Harry can fix just about anything. I'm talking receivers, tape decks, turntables, EQs, power amps, and yes, guitar and bass amps. Phone number over there is 313-533-3635. Open Monday through Friday, 10 to 6. You need to check them out and tell them Jimmy sent you. Anyway, with that being said, like I always say, keep rocking.